It begins like so many high-stakes political exchanges do. A powerful senator with years of experience believes he's in control, armed with carefully rehearsed lines and a strategy designed to corner his opponent. Lindsey Graham, a man who has built his reputation on sharp questioning and courtroom-like theatrics, leans forward with that familiar look of confidence. To him, this is just another round, another opportunity to show dominance and catch someone off guard. But what he didn't anticipate was that Representative Jasmine Crockett wasn't walking into this moment unprepared. She wasn't just ready to face his tactics. She was holding something in reserve, something that would flip the script entirely. That's the story we're about to unravel. How a seasoned senator tried to trap one of Congress's most fearless voices, and how she used hidden evidence facts he didn't see coming to crush his attempt instantly. Why this story matters. You might be wondering, why focus on this exchange? Why does it matter beyond the spectacle of political sparring? Here's why. Because what played out between Lindsey Graham and Jasmine Crockett is bigger than just two people in a heated moment. It represents the larger struggle happening in American politics today, the struggle between narratives and facts, between performance and truth, between those who rely on intimidation and those who rely on preparation. This isn't just about politics. It's about the way truth can cut through noise, even when the odds seem stacked against it. When someone tries to bend the story to fit their agenda, the only real antidote is evidence, cold, hard facts, and Crockett, as we'll see, had them ready at the exact moment they mattered most, setting the scene. The room itself was charged with tension. You could almost feel the divide, not just between individuals, but between two worldviews. On one side, Lindsey Graham, polished, experienced, and few. Highly aware of the cameras. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, younger in tenure but armed with sharp instincts and a determination not to let the moment slip away. Graham thought he had the upper hand. He had been in these situations countless times, often using tone and pressure to put witnesses or colleagues on defense. But Crockett wasn't rattled. She listened. She measured, and she waited. This wasn't just a debate, it was a duel, and the weapon that would decide the outcome wasn't volume, sarcasm, or intimidation. It was evidence, what the viewer will learn. Over the course of this story, we're going to break down exactly how this confrontation unfolded, the lead-up, how Graham set his trap, and why he thought it would work. The defining moment, Crockett's calm but explosive unveiling of evidence. The immediate aftermath, how the room, the media, and the public responded. The deeper meaning, why moments like this go far beyond sound bites and reach into the heart of democracy itself. By the end, you'll understand not only what happened in that chamber, but also why it matters to politics, to truth, and even to your own role in confronting misinformation in daily life. A story about more than politics. Here's the truth. Political theater is nothing new. Senators and representatives often use their time in hearings less to uncover truth and more to score points. But what makes this exchange stand out is that Crockett didn't just survive the trap, she turned it back on its architect. Think about that for a moment. In an arena where the loudest voice often overshadows substance, she demonstrated the power of preparation and facts. She showed that even when someone tries to control the narrative, it's possible to seize the moment and shift it entirely with evidence. That's a lesson that applies everywhere, not just in Washington, a custom quote to frame the story. As we dive deeper into this confrontation, let's keep one avoiding thought in mind. In a world full of confident fiction, it only takes one person with facts to change everything. That's what Jasmine Crockett did in this moment. And that's why her exchange with Lindsey Graham is worth paying attention to. The promise of what's ahead. So here's what you can expect as we move forward. First, we'll look at the build-up, how Graham positioned himself, the tactics he used, and the expectations set by the media and the public. Then we'll zoom in on the confrontation itself, a play-by-play breakdown of how Crockett dismantled his attack with hidden evidence. After that, we'll explore the fallout, the immediate reactions, the commentary, and the consequences. And finally, we'll discuss why this matters, beyond the moment, what it means for truth in politics, and what it means for all of us. This isn't just a recap. It's an exploration of a turning point in how political conversations are evolving, and how facts, when wielded with precision, can silence even the most powerful voices. Setting the tone. This is not about cheering for one side or mocking another. It's about pulling back the curtain and showing you how truth works when it's tested under fire. You'll see the methods, the strategies, the turning points. And most importantly, you'll see how one moment of preparation can change the outcome of an entire exchange. So buckle in. What began as Lindsey Graham's attempt to trap Jasmine Crockett is about to transform into a story of how facts can outshine fiction, how one moment of clarity can echo far beyond the walls of a single hearing room. If the confrontation itself was a storm, then the hours and days leading up to it were the slow gathering of thunderclouds. To fully understand why Lindsey Graham thought he could trap Jasmine Crockett and why his attempt ultimately backfired, you have to look at the build-up. This wasn't an isolated clash. It was part of a broader political pattern, one that has played out countless times before, an established senator comfortable in his position and ski. Alden rhetoric tries to put a newer, outspoken representative on the defensive. It's a playbook as old as politics itself, and for a moment Graham believed it would work. But beneath the surface, the dynamics were shifting in ways he didn't anticipate. The stage of political theater. To start, consider the environment. Congressional hearings aren't just about uncovering truth or asking questions, they're performances. Senators and representatives know that the cameras are rolling, that their clips will live forever online, and that one viral moment can change public perception. For Lindsey Graham, this was a familiar stage. Over the years, he has honed his persona as the tough questioner, the sharp-tongued senator who can rattle opponents with a mix of sarcasm and pressure. His strategy often relies on controlling the pace of questioning, cutting off, redirecting, and reframing to keep his opponent reacting instead of leading. But Jasmine Crockett is no ordinary opponent. She has built her reputation not just on fiery rhetoric, but on meticulous preparation. In hearing after hearing, she has demonstrated that she doesn't just show up, she shows up ready, and in this case, her readiness would make all the difference. The trap Graham tried to set. Graham's plan was straightforward. Paint Crockett into a corner, using a line of questioning designed to expose supposed weaknesses in her legal knowledge and arguments. By pressing her hard, interrupting often, and presenting his narrative as fact, he hoped to create the illusion of dominance. It's a tactic that works when the target stumbles, hesitates, or tries to argue without solid evidence at hand. The public watching the rapid back and forth often sides with whoever looks more confident and in control. And Graham has played this role long enough to know that confidence can sometimes look like truth. The mistake he made was assuming that Crockett would walk into this exchange unprepared or at least unable to counter his points on the spot patterns of misrepresentation. To understand Graham's miscalculation, you have to recognize a broader pattern. Time and again, powerful figures in hearings use a tactic that seems effective in the moment. They introduce misleading narratives, cherry-pick facts, or simply assert unverified claims as though they are undeniable truths. For the average viewer who may not know all the background details, these claims can sound convincing. The danger is that repetition of a false narrative often cements it in the public mind. This is why preparation matters, and it's exactly why Crockett had something ready that would dismantle his approach. Public expectations. Heading into the exchange, media coverage and public expectations played their own role. Many commentators had predicted another tense hearing full of sound bites but light on substance. For Graham, that wasn't a problem, it fit his style. But for Crockett, the challenge was different. The public expected her to fight back to defend herself, but few expected her to have the kind of evidence that would flip the tables entirely. The assumption based on the typical rhythm of these hearings was that Graham would dominate the conversation while Crockett fought to get a word in. That's what made her eventual reveal so powerful. It shattered not just Graham's strategy, but the audience's expectations, Crockett's quiet strategy. In the hours leading up to the hearing, Crockett wasn't scrambling or second-guessing. She was organizing, reviewing, and preparing. She knew Graham's style. She had seen his tactics before. She also understood that the key to neutralizing him wasn't to outshout him or to match his interruptions. It was to stay calm, stay patient, and wait for the right moment. Think of it as a chess match. Graham opened with predictable moves, forceful statements, leading questions, and interruptions designed to control the rhythm. Crockett, instead of reacting to each move, positioned hers. For the checkmate she knew was coming. Her hidden evidence wasn't just a weapon, it was a strategy. She knew it would only land if she waited until Graham had fully committed to his narrative, fully laid out his version of the truth. Only then could she strike in a way that made his entire argument collapse in front of everyone. Watching. Rising tension in the room. Observers in the room could feel the tension building as Graham began his line of questioning. He was confident, leaning into his usual persona, and for the first several exchanges it seemed like he was in control. He pressed, he cut off, he reframed. Crockett, however, didn't take the bait. She didn't look flustered. She didn't raise her voice. To some, it may have even seemed like she was on the defensive. But what was really happening was more strategic. She was allowing Graham to build his case brick by brick, so that when she knocked it down, the collapse would be absolute. She used patience as her weapon. She let him overextend, let him lean fully into his performance, and then pulled the rug out from under him. The tension wasn't just between the two of them, it was in the audience as well. Some supporters of Graham were eager to see him land a decisive blow. Supporters of Crockett, on the other hand, were anxious, wondering if she would get the chance to respond at all. This uncertainty only made the eventual moment more powerful, the transition to the climax. By the time Graham had repeated his narrative several times, confident, certain, and convinced that Crockett was cornered, the stage was fully set. He had spoken over her, dismissed her interjections, and laid out what he believed to be an airtight case. And that's exactly when Crockett made her move. This is the turning point, the moment where the build-up ends and the confrontation begins. The audience didn't know it yet, but Graham had walked right into the trap he thought he was set in. Closing the build-up. The beauty of this build-up is that it wasn't just about politics, it was about human psychology. Graham assumed dominance would equal victory. He assumed performance would overshadow substance, and for a while it looked like that might work. But Crockett understood something deeper, that facts, when timed correctly, have more power than even the loudest voice. She knew that letting him overplay his hand was the only way to ensure that her response would not only silence him, but leave no room for rebuttal. The tension had been building, the clouds had been gathering, and now the lightning strike was about to come. If Section 2 was about the thunderclouds gathering, this was the moment the storm broke. The confrontation between Lindsey Graham and Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a heated exchange. It was a carefully set trap that Graham thought he had built for Crockett, only to find himself ensnared in it. Graham's opening moves. When Lindsey Graham began, he carried the swagger of a seasoned interrogator. He leaned forward, voice sharp, eyes fixed on Crockett. His tactic was familiar. Rapid fire, questions, rhetorical traps, and interruptions meant to destabilize his opponent, Representative Crockett. He began, tone-laced with skepticism. You claim to have a legal background that qualifies you to speak on these matters, but can you tell us exactly where the Constitution grants the authority you're so eager to exercise? Before Crockett could answer, Graham cut in again. And let's be clear here. You're not suggesting that your interpretation holds more weight than decades of precedent, are you? This was Graham's style. Don't let the witness build an answer. Don't allow them the breathing room to set context. Force them into yes or no answers. Create the illusion that their expertise is hollow by never giving them space to prove it. For several minutes he played this game. Each time Crockett opened her mouth, he cut her off, shook his head, or chuckled dismissively. Crockett's calm restraint. To an untrained observer, it may have seemed like Crockett was on the defensive. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't snapping back. She wasn't trying to outshout him, but anyone paying closer attention could see something else happening. She was letting him talk. She was letting him build his narrative, brick by brick, statement by statement, without challenging the foundation yet. She knew that if she responded too soon, the impact of her evidence would be diluted. Timing was everything. Her body language said it all. She sat upright, composed, eyes steady. She didn't fidget. She didn't let irritation show. In politics, optics matter as much as words, and in that moment her calmness contrasted sharply with Graham's aggressive interruptions, Graham's fatal overreach. The moment of overreach came when Graham, convinced that Crockett had no substantive answer, declared, "So once again we have another politician here who talks big about the law but can't actually point to the facts. You don't have the evidence, Representative, admit it. You're just making political noise." He leaned back in his chair, smirk curling on his lips. In his mind, the trap had worked. He had proven to the audience that Crockett had no answer, but he had just handed her the exact opening she needed. Crockett's counterstrike. Crockett's voice was calm but cutting as she began, "Senator Graham, with all due respect, I didn't interrupt you when you made your claims, so I would appreciate the same courtesy." The room shifted. For the first time, Graham leaned back, eyes narrowing. Crockett reached into her binder and pulled out a stack of neatly organized documents. "You said I don't have the evidence. That's interesting because what I have here are your own words on record under oath from just 3 years ago." The silence was immediate. The cameras zoomed in. Staffers shuffled nervously. Crockett continued, "You argued then, Senator, almost verbatim, the exact position you're mocking me for defending today, word for word. All I read it aloud." She didn't wait for permission. She began reading, her voice steady, every syllable echoing through the chamber. The words, taken directly from Graham's own testimony, directly contradicted the arguments he had just made against her. The sixth interruption. As she read, Graham tried to interject. "That's not what I meant." But Crockett raised her hand slightly, not with aggression, but with command. "Please, Senator, you've spoken at length. Let me finish. The American people deserve to hear the full context." Gasps rippled through the audience. Crockett had just flipped the power dynamic. Graham's weapon control of the conversation was gone. The hidden evidence. She laid out the documents in sequence, citing page numbers, quotes, and dates. Every single claim Graham had made against her collapsed under the weight of his own prior words. It wasn't just evidence, it was devastating, because this wasn't a matter of differing opinions, this was a matter of documented hypocrisy. "You see," Senator Crockett said, locking eyes with him, "the problem isn't that I lack evidence. The problem is that you're hoping no one remembers yours." The seventh comeback. At this point, Graham tried one last time to regain control. His voice rose. "You're mischaracterizing my position. Representative, you don't understand the nuance of what I said." And that's when Crockett delivered the seventh and final blow. "Senator Graham, nuance doesn't erase facts, and facts don't disappear because you talk over them." The chamber went dead silent. Graham's mouth opened slightly as though to speak, but no words came out. His weapon of interruption had failed him, and his silence said more than anything he could have uttered. Reaction in the room. The energy shifted instantly. Some observers tried to stifle smiles. Others leaned forward, eager not to miss a second. Staffers exchanged nervous glances. For those watching on camera, the shift was just as dramatic. Social media began to light up within seconds, clips of Crockett's comeback already circulating before the hearing had then ended. For Graham, this was the nightmare scenario. Not just being challenged, but being exposed by his own record. Why it worked. Crockett's victory in that moment wasn't just about having evidence. It was about strategy. She didn't waste time arguing with interruptions. She didn't let herself be flustered. She waited until Graham was fully committed to his narrative, then revealed the proof that demolished it. She used patience as her weapon. She let him overextend, let him lean fully into his performance, and then pulled the rug out from under him. That's why her seventh comeback silenced him instantly. It wasn't just a clever line. It was the culmination of preparation, timing, and truth. A defining moment. Every political career has defining moments, the ones that get replayed for years to come. For Lindsey Graham, this was a defining moment he wished had never happened. For Jasmine Crockett, it was a defining moment of triumph, a demonstration not just of legal skill, but of political mastery. And for the American public, it was a reminder that facts, when wielded with precision, can cut through even the loudest noise. When Jasmine Crockett dropped her evidence and turned Lindsey Graham's words against him, the chamber shifted in real time. But the real aftershocks of that moment didn't stay confined to the walls of the hearing. They spilled outward onto social media, into the press, and across kitchen table conversations all over the country. The confrontation wasn't just a sharp exchange. It was the kind of political flashpoint that reshapes narratives and forces people to pick sides. The media firestorm. By the time Crockett closed, her binder clips were already hitting Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. The phrase, hidden evidence, trended within minutes. Major outlets scrambled to get their coverage out. CNN led with Crockett stuns, Graham with receipts. Exposes his contradictions on live TV, MSNBC's headlines. Went even further, Crockett crushes Graham. The hearing clip that broke the internet. Even conservative-leaning outlets had to acknowledge the exchange, though they framed it differently. Fox News ran with Crockett ambushes Graham with Old Testimony debate, erupts over context. Every outlet knew one thing. The confrontation wasn't just another routine spar, it was a viral moment with staying power. Social media reactions on Twitter, hashtags like Crockett crushes, Graham hidden. Evidence and seventh comeback shot up the trending list. Users looped the final line. Nuance doesn't erase facts, and facts don't disappear because you talk over them as if it were a battle anthem. TikTok creators turned the exchange into remix videos, pairing Crockett's words with music, slow-motion effects, and even courtroom-style edits. Instagram Reels flooded feeds with commentary from influencers, lawyers, and political analysts alike. The overwhelming tone, admiration for Crockett's patience and precision. Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in waiting for the right moment. One viral tweet read, gaining over 200,000 likes in less than a day. Graham's defensive spin. Inside Graham's camp, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Staffers huddled to craft a response, but they faced a dilemma. How do you explain away a moment where your own words are read back to you in public? Graham tried the familiar strategy: go on, cable news, reframe the narrative. That same evening, he appeared on Fox News claiming, "Look what Representative Crockett did was take my words completely out of context." She cherry-picked a statement to score political points, but the problem was Crockett had read not just one line, but multiple pages of his prior testimony. She had shown the dates, the setting, the precise language. His attempt to frame it as out of context rang hollow for many. In fact, his defensive spin only fueled more discussion. Clips of him backpedaling on TV were quickly paired, side by side with the original footage, showing the stark contrast Crockett's rising profile. For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath was a career-defining moment. Her calm under pressure and her ability to land the knockout blow without theatrics elevated her from sharp debater to political heavyweight. Journalists began describing her as a rising star in Congress and a new face of fact-driven accountability. Editorials praised not just her evidence but her strategy. She didn't just out-argue. Graham wrote one columnist, she out-prepared him. That's the difference between playing politics and practicing law. Crockett herself, however, played it cool. When asked about the viral clip by reporters outside the Capitol, she simply said, "I just did my job." Facts speak for themselves. My hope is that the American people remember them as clearly as I do. Her restraint in the aftermath only strengthened her credibility. Public polarization. Of course, the public split along predictable lines. Supporters of Crockett hailed her as a champion of truth and composure. Critics, particularly in Graham's corner, accused her of grandstanding. But here's the key. Even among moderates, Crockett's performance resonated. Many independents and undecided voters expressed admiration for the way she handled herself. "I don't always agree with her politics," one voter told a local reporter, "but I respect the way she handled Graham. She came with proof. That's what we need more of: politicians with receipts, not sound bites." That sentiment hinted at something deeper. The fallout wasn't just about who won the exchange, it was about reinforcing the value of preparation in an era of political theater. Early consequences for Graham. For Graham, the immediate consequence was a credibility hit. His attempt to trap Crockett had backfired spectacularly, leaving him painted as hypocritical. Within 24 hours, late night, comedians were already lampooning him. One joked, Lindsey Graham tried to lay a trap for Jasmine Crockett, but she brought receipts, his own receipts. That's like robbing a bank and leaving your ID at the counter. The mockery spread fast, and Graham's office faced a flood of critical calls and emails. Behind closed doors, allies reportedly advised him to let the story die rather than keep fueling it, but in the court of public opinion, the damage had been done. The broader political impact, beyond the individuals, the confrontation sent ripples through the broader political landscape. It reminded lawmakers and the public that evidence still matters, that in an age of talking points, interruptions and grandstanding preparation can turn the tide. It also highlighted a generational shift. Graham represented an older style of politics: dominate the conversation, cut off your opponent and win through control of the room. Crockett represented a newer style: wait, prepare, and dismantle the performance with substance. That contrast became part of the broader narrative. Political analysts debated whether Crockett's approach signaled a shift in how younger politicians could redefine engagement in a media-driven age, a defining aftermath. By the end of that week, the story had reached millions. Crockett's profile had skyrocketed. Graham's credibility had taken a blow, and the American public had witnessed another reminder of how fragile political theater becomes when confronted with hard evidence. The confrontation may have lasted minutes, but the fallout stretched far longer. It was discussed in classrooms, dissected on podcasts, and even turned into memes that carried the lesson far beyond the political bubble. In other words, Crockett hadn't just won the moment, she had shaped the narrative that followed. When the dust settled, one question lingered far beyond the hearing room. Why did this moment matter so much? Why did millions of people stop scrolling to replay Crockett's calm rebuttal and Graham's flustered reaction? Because this wasn't just a clash between two politicians, it was a symbolic showdown between two competing G-forces in modern democracy: performance versus preparation, spin versus substance, rhetoric versus reality. Why facts matter more than rhetoric. In a political climate where sound bites often replace solutions, Crockett's performance reminded people of something rare: the power of facts. Graham tried to trap her with interruptions, framing, and pressure, classic tools of political theater, but Crockett didn't take the bait. She relied on verifiable evidence, clear documentation, and her own calm persistence. This matters because it reaffirmed a timeless truth. Rhetoric may sway the moment, but facts endure. The clip of Crockett dismantling Graham went viral, not just because it was dramatic, but because it carried a deeper reassurance that truth can still cut through noise, as one commentator put it. Crockett didn't just win an argument. She reminded us that the foundation of democracy isn't talking louder, it's proving your case. Why preparation beats confidence. Another takeaway: confidence alone is not enough. Graham entered the hearing with bravado. He interrupted, pressed, and projected the air of a veteran politician in control. But Crockett had something far stronger: preparation. Her hidden evidence wasn't a cheap trick. It was the product of foresight, of doing the work beforehand, of anticipating the trap and having the receipts ready. And that's why her rebuttal struck so hard. It didn't just silence Graham. It exposed the fragility of overconfidence without substance. In an era where political discourse often rewards the loudest in the room, Crockett's moment showed that being the most prepared in the room is what truly reshapes narratives. The larger lesson for democracy. Zoom out, and the confrontation wasn't just about Crockett versus Graham. It was about what their exchange represented for democracy itself. Every day, people are bombarded with misinformation, half-truths, and carefully crafted answers designed to sway opinion. The danger isn't just in the lies. It's in the exhaustion that comes from constantly sifting through them. That's why Crockett's evidence mattered so much. It wasn't merely about catching Graham in a contradiction. It was about demonstrating that democracy still has tools to fight back. Facts, preparation, and persistence can cut through performance, even when the odds feel stacked. As the custom quote reminds us, democracy isn't a spectator sport. It survives only when ordinary people defend the truth. That's the heart of why this story matters. Crockett didn't just defend herself. She defended the very idea that truth still has a place in public life, a call to value truth in daily life. It's easy to watch this as entertainment, to treat it as just another viral clip in a noisy news cycle. But the real takeaway belongs to all of us. How often do we let overconfidence or spin dominate our workplaces, our classrooms, or our communities? How often do we stay quiet when misinformation spreads in conversations with friends or family? Crockett's example challenges us to do more, not by shouting louder, but by preparing better, not by playing the same game, but by bringing receipts. The fight for truth isn't only fought in congressional hearings, it's fought in everyday conversations, in what we share online, and in how we hold leaders accountable. The emotional peak. This was more than a heated debate. It was a reminder that facts still have power. It was proof that preparation can dismantle performance. It was a call to arms for everyone who believes democracy must be defended, not with noise, but with evidence, persistence, and courage. Crockett's victory wasn't just over Graham. It was a victory for truth in a time when truth often feels drowned out. And that's why this story matters. Because when one person stands prepared, armed with facts, it doesn't just silence a politician. It reignites faith in democracy itself. Now let's pause for a moment. We've talked about what happened. We've broken down Graham's attempted TR. Crockett's calm but decisive response and the fallout that followed. But the real question is this: what does this moment mean for you? Because this isn't just a story about politics, it's a story about truth, about power, and about how ordinary people just like you, can push back against misinformation in their own lives. Reflective questions. Think about it for a second. How many times have you been in a conversation where someone tries to dominate the room with confidence, but you know they're bending the truth? Have you ever sat there quietly wishing you had the words or the evidence to call them out? And more importantly, what would it feel like to actually be ready to have the receipts in your back pocket to calmly dismantle spin with undeniable facts? That's exactly what Jasmine Crockett did in that hearing, and that's exactly what you can do in your own life. Why this resonates beyond politics. Here's the thing. Misinformation doesn't just live in Congress, it shows up everywhere. In workplaces when a coworker spreads half-truths to climb higher, in schools when rumors are treated as reality, on social media where one viral post can spread lies faster than the truth can catch up. Crockett's moment matters because it shows us a blueprint. Don't fight noise with more noise. Fight it with preparation, patience, and proof. Encouraging engagement. Now I want to bring you in directly. If you've ever faced a moment like this, whether in a debate with a friend, a heated argument online, or even a family dinner conversation, drop it in the comments. Share your story, because your experiences matter, and they help build a community where people realize they're not alone in this fight for truth. And if you've ever stayed quiet, let me ask you this. What held you back? Was it fear of confrontation? Was it not having the facts? Or maybe it was thinking your voice wouldn't matter. Here's the truth. Your voice. It does matter. And sometimes it only takes one person standing up with the facts to change the entire conversation, making it relatable. Think about how many times you've scrolled through your feed and seen wild claims get thousands of shares while the correction barely gets noticed. Doesn't that feel familiar to what Graham tried to do, dominate with sound bites and spectacle instead of substance? But here's the difference. When someone like Crockett calmly brings evidence, the narrative shifts instantly. And the same applies to your life. You don't need a big stage. You just need the courage to speak up when it counts. The bigger connection. At its core, this story isn't just about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about truth versus spin, and that's a battle all of us are part of, whether we like it or not. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by misinformation, if you've ever felt like lies are louder than the truth, then Crockett's moment should remind you of this. The truth may not shout, but it doesn't have to. It just has to show up steady and undeniable, bringing it back to you. So let me ask you directly, what will you do the next time someone tries to trap you in a conversation with half-truths or outright lies? Will you shrink back, or will you prepare yourself with the facts you need to push back? Will you let misinformation dominate, or will you be the person who calmly and firmly puts reality back on the table? These aren't rhetorical questions, they're real challenges. And your answer determines whether you become a spectator or a participant in defending truth. Engagement. Prompt. If this story hit you the way it hits so many others, don't just watch and move on. Join the conversation. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Drop your thoughts below. Because democracy doesn't survive on silence. It survives on people speaking up, learning together, and holding leaders accountable. And yes, that starts with you. When you strip away the noise, the interruptions, and the theatrics, what happened in that room was simple. One person tried to control the narrative with half-truths, and another person calmly dismantled it with preparation and evidence. Jasmine Crockett's moment against Lindsey Graham wasn't just a win in a single hearing. It was a reminder of a much larger truth. Facts are stronger than bluster, and preparation will always outlast spin. Restating the lesson. The lesson here isn't about personalities. It isn't even about one party versus another. It's about what happens when someone refuses to be bullied into silence, when they refuse to let misinformation dominate the stage. Crockett showed that you don't need to shout louder, you just need to be sharper, steadier, and anchored in the truth. And that matters for every one of us, because these same dynamics happen outside of politics every single day. At work, when false rumors threaten your credibility. At school, when peer pressure spreads faster than facts. On social media, when a lie goes viral before the truth even gets noticed. In each of those spaces, you have a choice. Stay silent and let the spin take over, or step in armed with facts and set the record straight. Why you should stay engaged. That's why stories like this matter, because they aren't just about what happened in Washington, they're blueprints for what can happen in our own lives. If you value truth, if you care about democracy, then this is your reminder. Staying informed isn't optional. Speaking up isn't optional. Democracy doesn't run on autopilot. It runs on people, ordinary people who care enough to defend it. And that's why staying connected to conversations like this one matters. Call to action. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the power of preparation, of how facts can cut through even the loudest lies, then don't stop here. Subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown of moments where truth takes center stage. Share this video with someone who needs to see that facts still matter. Or join the conversation in the comments. Tell us, when was the last time you saw someone try to dominate with spin, and how would you have handled it? Your voice matters here. And the more people who step up, the stronger the defense of truth becomes. Closing line. Because here's the reality. Misinformation won't stop on its own. Bullies won't stop on their own. And democracy, our shared democracy, will not defend itself. In the end, democracy doesn't defend itself. That's our job. The question is, will you be ready when your moment comes?